This super laser blast of information changes everything. Welcome to the Star Wars Unlimited podcast, where we discuss how to outmaneuver your opponents. I'm Faith, and I'm joined with Jrod, Cqrbon, and his Dudeness. We are recording today less than an hour after the FFG Community Celebration stream on Saturday, February 10th, where we received many updates and new information. Before we start, we want to announce that in celebration to the lead up of the pre release of Spark of Rebellion in less than 3 weeks, we are going to be releasing 3 videos a week during the month of February on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. Hit that subscribe button to be notified when they release. Also, check out our Twitter in the description box for new weekly lethal puzzles. Once you think you have the answer, DM our Twitter account and we will let you know if you have the right answer. Let's waste no more time and begin by discussing the newly revealed spoilers. Which of the 21 cards we got today excited you?
Was it 21? I thought it was just 17.
It was 21 cards.
What were the other four cards?
The 4 aspectless cards.
Yeah, we got a ton of stuff today. So many new cards, so much new information. It's just an absolute blast. I just want to say first off, watch this stream today. But my favorite card, probably from this stream, I got to talk about Superlaser Blast. It is an 8 cost Vigilance Villainy, so blue black event. It's a legendary event, and it just says the text is 3 words, but it's the most beautiful words I've ever read on a card. It just says defeat all units. Absolutely gorgeous. It's our first, other than Overwhelming Barrage, it's kind of like the premier board wipe. It's just everything is gone. Nothing can avoid it. It is inevitable. It just clears the entire board. And this is so cool. And I was really hoping we were gonna get an effect like this set. And now we did get it, and I'm super excited to be playing this in my villain blue control decks going forward.
Now, thankfully, it costs 8, and as long as you're not brain dead, you don't play stuff on the board when your opponent has 8 resources up, right?
Yeah, you'll have to be a little careful with this card especially when you get to those, they're holding up 8 resources. You got to not overcommit to the board.
Yeah,
It's also it's
don't do
also
that.
not yeah, it's also not super effective against like turbo aggressive decks, but I think where this is really going to shine is in these slower matchups, right? When this card can go, can is one card and can clear any other potential amount
Including
of cards,
leaders.
including leaders, which is very important. If they go all in on one leader, like for example, Darth Vader deck that wants to play a bunch of lightsabers on him, then they're only going to have that for one turn, probably, unless, I mean, if you ramped, it's even sooner. But then you're able to just wipe their board, and then all that progress they spent on that leader is gone. So they got to be a little careful over committing to one card or playing a bunch of cards when this card is potentially available on the other side of the field.
I, I will just note quickly that I think the Emperor's Legion stocks are up a little bit because if your opponent wipes your board with Super Laser Blast, you can pay 2 and get all those units defeated back into your hand. So at the very least, I think it'll be a nice sideboard card
Yeah.
in some decks for sure.
So the biggest thing with this card, I that yes, you can play around it, but the problem is that Blue Villainy has other things. The Edict effect, it's a Power of the Dark Side, right? So it's like you're playing this weird game of how many units I want to play out. I can't play out too many, but I have to play enough. Where like before this card, you could just jam all your stuff on the board and you wanted to play as much as possible. This card really then lets you play a mind game with your opponent a little bit of like, do I make him have it? Do I not commit as hard? And they have other removal to remove things. It's like it definitely will change how a lot of mid-range decks play against control.
Definitely. I don't think it changes much how aggro plays.
Not really.
I think one thing I'm interested in about this card is it's a tactic, and in this set, we don't have anything that interacts with tactics. But when looking at a lot of the events, we do have that tactic keyword. So I'm interested to see what in future sets will either make this cheaper, allow you to search them out. So there's some future proofing there as well. That disaster keyword, we do
Mhm.
have
It's
a
the first
few
time
disasters.
first time we see that.
We
And
also saw it in Smoke and Cinders as well.
and I wonder if that's sort of the indication that it's symmetrical effect, right? It's going to affect all players equally, right? Both of
Mm.
those cards affect all players equally, so disasters could kind of fill that kind of niche.
Smoke and Cinders is a 5 cost red card. It says each player discards all but 2 cards of their choice from their hand, and it's a reference.
Not exactly the Hyperspace card that was revealed
No.
today.
No, but since we're talking about board wipes, we're going to go to my Hypeth card, and I think does very much affect aggro decks in a negative way. Is Bombing Run, which is a 5-cost aggression tactic. It says choose an arena, ground or space, deal 3 damage to each unit in that arena, and it is also a rare. And let me just say that I think that this card is going to change a lot how aggro decks play. A lot of common lines for aggro decks would be like A-Wing into is it red 3, right? Red 3. And then both of those have 3 HP. So they're gonna have to be very cognizant of trying to play all these 3 HP units out. Because then if you have bombing run, you just wipe the whole board with 1 card. And that can just kind of spell disaster for the aggro deck.
It
Especially if you're gonna ramp into it.
it sort of helps incentivize you to actually split lanes now,
Mhm.
right? If you got a boy in space and a boy on the ground, it can only hit one or the other. It can't hit both. It also slightly increases the stocks on Metal Ceremony
Mhm.
because now if you can attack and get that boy up to 4 health, all right, that's going to be a lot better for you. So there's certainly some play around. It definitely something like this was needed, right? Like we knew we
Yeah.
were getting some sort of damage space.
Yeah, I mean, Faith and I were when we were watching the stream and we only had 1 card left. Bombing Run was the last revealed card. We were kind of contemplating. We're like, the one thing red really needs is like a board wipe because you have like Barrage in green and you have obviously Super Laser Blast been announced.
In
We had that
blue,
in blue, and then yellow has like Outmaneuver, which is like kind of pseudo removal for that.
ish, yeah,
Yeah,
ish.
for an arena, and like so red kind of got theirs now, and we were like, it's probably gonna deal damage. And we were like, if it costs 3, it's gonna do 2 damage, but that doesn't seem strong enough. So we're like, then if it's 5, it's probably 3 damage. We didn't think it was gonna have an arena constraint,
Restriction.
but for the first set, I don't mind it, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's
we'll
fine.
probably
Yeah.
get better stuff, better removal in the future. So like, I think this card will probably see a good amount of play moving forward, and I'm definitely gonna want 3 hyperspace these as well.
I think
Thankfully,
with
it's a rare too for
Yeah,
draft considerations because
100%.
that card is going to wreck some people in draft for sure. And that being that uncommon would be maybe a little toxic, but
I think with this last card reveal, we have to have a moment of peace for there being no Y-wing card in this first set,
Hero
which
Y
is
Wing.
we do get the cool art with them in this picture of Bombing Run, but sadly no Y-wing card itself.
No Y Wing, no TIE Bomber, no CR-90 Corvette, no Tantive 4. There's a few spaceships that did not make it in.
Which
Set.
we'll hopefully see in future upcoming sets. As for cards that we did get in this stream and today, I think Force Lightning is a very interesting card. It's a 1-cost event that's aggression and villainy, and it says choose a unit. It loses all abilities for this phase. Then, if you control a Force unit, pay any number of resources and deal 2 damage to the chosen unit for each resource paid this way. At first, that sounds like a lot. So what you're doing is you're choosing a unit and you can make it lose all abilities for this phase. I think that alone is a very interesting thing. We can think the first things I can kind of think of are it gets around Sentinel. It's going to remove someone with like a grid ability to help them. So things like that, I think will have kind of immediate value, or even Saboteur if you have your wall and you don't want them to get through your wall. Those are just some quick things, but then there's other effects that units have. Something like a Han Solo, it's his ability to shoot first that could be turned off temporarily. Then
Yeah,
after that, it also gives you ability to deal damage to a unit as well. So if you do have force, it makes the spell even better. But I think even for just that 1 cost to make the unit lose abilities, that alone is interesting enough.
yeah, for the making something lose its abilities is incredibly unique so far in this game. This is the only card that does that, which already makes it super valuable, and it's a legendary card, so it's going to be highly sought after. I think it's very strong. The first thing that I saw when I or thought of, sorry, when I saw this card was this is finally a way to deal with your opponent's Super Laser Technician, which has been an extremely strong card. Super Laser Technician is a 3-cost 2/1. When defeated, you add it as a ready resource to your pile, but this shuts off its when defeated effect, so you're able to remove it from the board, and they don't get that extra resource. So you deny them that ramp. So I think that's a really big deal, and so I look forward to preventing the ramp of my opponents with this card in the future.
I would say the biggest thing for me Force Lightning would be K2SO. Assuming I think that this card brings up the stocks of Fifth Brother. I think his stocks are pretty down. But then being able to play Fifth Brother, and the next turn, if your opponent plays K2, you can Force Lightning K2 and not take any damage from him or not lose a card because of Force Lightning is a pretty impactful play. Or even just trading into your Fifth Brother into him because you're playing a control deck, I think is a very reasonable option as well.
When you can also just do, if you play Fifth Brother, you can just go, you pay the 2 extra, and not only does it silence K2, but then it'll deal 4 damage to him to just remove him, and then you're still holding 1 up for a different ability or Force Choke, the other Force thing, that, or Force Throw, which also costs 1. So some really disgusting plays to deal with these when defeated triggers in particular.
And then I think using the force keyword just makes, as we've heard before from other streams, forces what the designers think is probably the strongest trait to have.
For sure.
But I think this card's really cool because if you could draw it early, as we talked about, you make them lose abilities. But if you draw it late, you can still just take out a unit as well if you do have that force unit. So it's kind of the first card that we have with in other games, kind of kicker magic used as a keyword, but this ability to kind of use a lot of your resources up, or as many resources as you want up, in order to maybe remove a unit. Just like a thing I'm thinking of with that is if you pay for looks like 6 resources, you can remove a full life Devastator.
Which could be okay.
The flexibility of it is what really sells me. It just seems like you are almost always going to find a use for it. It's obviously even better if you have force stuff, so you can have total control over the damage aspect. But even just removing something's keywords and it's, or not keywords, but it's like its abilities. Yeah, it's super cool card for sure.
Dudeness, what card do you like?
I'll be honest, none of these cards really like super grabbed me today. But one card that I am interested to at least try is U-Wing Reinforcement. The 7-cost command hero event that says search the top 10 cards of your deck for up to 3 units with combined cost 7 or less and play each of them for free. So this guy can he could just straight up grab a 7-cost boy out of the top 10 if you really need that Luke. On curve, he can go grab it. You can grab a couple 2-cost boys and an Akbar. So now your Akbar comes down dealing at least 3 damage, potentially more if you already have some on the board. I'm not sure who wants this card though. Like, does Luke want this card? This definitely feels like a Green Han card, but
That's where
like,
my
is is
mind went.
is Luke running this card in his green list?
I mean, I think the best place for this card is probably like a Green Han. And then it's also like a great follow-up if your opponent like Super Laser Blasts, because then you can kind of like refill the board again, right? I think that's
Right.
also a reasonable play for it as well. It can also just get you a 7-cost unit. It can get you a Mace. It can get you a Luke. It can get you a home one. Right? It can get you home one. But any 7-cost unit, it can just pull out for you. So it doesn't have to be the small stuff either, right?
Or 7 1-cost boys? I mean, truly,
No,
that's
it's
where
search up to 3
He knows.
units.
He's memeing. He's
Oh, it's
memeing.
up to 3. Damn it, foiled once again.
Oh, he's not memeing. I got him.
Well, and you can also just go kind of in between what we've talked about, and sometimes you could get away with a 4-cost and a 3-cost.
Yeah,
Right.
4-cost and 3-cost play is pretty reasonable.
That seems like a very solid play, especially like I'm thinking if I was to play this in Chewbacca, I'd pull like Kanan and then I don't know, maybe a Sentinel, maybe an Akbar, something else to support. But it's a very cool card. And I like the flexibility of it, of you just have total control over what you put on the field out of those top 10 cards. I like just being able to dig for, like Jrod said, just a 7-cost. Like, you don't have a Luke in hand, but you know that there's like 3 copies. You haven't drawn any copies, you haven't resourced any. You know there's a very good chance that there's a Luke just waiting in there. You can go find it, pull it out, and just surprise your
Play
opponent
it
with it.
immediately, right?
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing, is it lets you play all of these immediately, like together, which is pretty cool. So you can do, like, I'm sure there's going to be some little combos that you can do when you find certain cards together. It's going to make this pretty interesting. So
Like Falcon
I-
Fleet Lieutenant comes in there and hits for 5 right off the rip.
but Fleet Lieutenant won't buff.
Yeah,
but-
Falcon's
Oh,
not
doesn't
rebel.
buff. But like something like that effect where like something comes in readied and you buff it right off the
Yeah.
bat. Like I think
Well,
that's
you've got like the 4-cost 4/4 ambush that gets it gets ambush when you have another green card. I can't remember what that's card
Yeah.
The
called.
escort skiff,
Skiff.
Yeah,
That's what
escort skiff. So you can you can pull that out and then pull another green card out to make sure that it's activated.
so that it
Um,
gets ambushed right away.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
that's
I think that
actually I like that. I like that a lot actually.
I think that flexibility, as you mentioned, Carbon, is a really important thing about this card. And that way, even if you don't like, if you want to get a Luke, but you don't get a Luke, you still have so many options about what you're going to get because it is 3 units that cost up to 7. It's pretty easy to get value out of that. It definitely has an interesting parallel with Vader, who also costs 7 in villainy, but he also searches 10 cards as well. But he only can get something that costs a villain unit that costs 3 or less, or any number of villain units that cost 3 or less. And that is a lot more limiting because there's been times when I've played it and I get a bunch of these big cards and I'm like, oh, I can't use those. With this card, if I get that Luke, great. And if I don't get the Luke, as you said, I can get a Kane and a Yoda. I can choose the option, but it also really fits into that idea of command heroism, which is going wide. It really feels like I'm going to go wide with this card.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even do something crazy like Rogue, a skirmisher. What was the name of that card? Rogue skirmisher, whatever.
The
The
6-cost 4/6 ambush, get a 2-cost card
get a
back from
two
the
cost,
discard pile.
and then you can play a powerhouse like Bell Organa with it, dude. It's
Or an
pretty
R2D yeah,
good.
R2D2, something like that.
Dude,
I
it's
guess
just
do we
living in
know
value
how
stack.
this works? Do we know how this works if you get like R2D2 and C3PO
I was just thinking that actually.
off the top? Because
I
I
would
that
assume you can
seems
play them in whatever order you want, so therefore you
well.
can
It's just
play
like, do you shuffle
R2,
the cards and put them back
you
on the
play
bottom first, and then they
3PO.
activate, or how?
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah,
Yeah, everything
okay,
would come out all at the same time. You'd
gotcha. Okay,
shuffle, and then you'd do all the effects in the
because that
order in
can
which you
immediately
played them.
draw a card. Yeah, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. This is just
The
super cool card.
card's neat, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
it's very cool. I'm sure it'll find a home somewhere. I don't know exactly where. I think Han Green is cool. I definitely want to try this in like a Chewbacca list. I think I could see it in Luke. Yeah, there's a bunch of decks that I think would like to at least try this card out and see if it can increase the power of the deck.
For sure.
Those timing windows will also be important for if you can get a green card and then get a skiff, which gives your guy ambush. Those are always important things to know and how to abuse them in the best way.
Yeah.
Now that we have all the Spark of Rebellion cards revealed, I look forward to seeing the new decks that people create. Apart from spoilers, we have also received some interesting updates, and surprisingly, we received information and gameplay of a new format, Twin Suns. Jrod, can you give us the basics of what we heard?
Yeah. So Twin Suns is going to be a free for all game where each person will bring 2 leaders with them and 1 base. The biggest change in this, because you'll be using the standard gameplay rule for unlimited, the only thing that really changes majorly is the take the initiative action is then replaced with take an available counter act. Because in this game mode, there's going to be 2 other counters on top of the initiative token that will be in the game mode, which are the blast counter and a plan counter. The blast counter does 1 damage immediately to each opponent's base. And then if the plan counter draws a card, then you place a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. And you can obviously choose the card you just drew. And so basically, once the first person takes initiative, if you don't have any actions, you would take one of these counters. And then if you're the last person that can't take one of the counters, you'd pass and the round would end, like a typical game of Star Wars Unlimited. You're not allowed to pass until you have no other legal actions to take on your turn. So you can't pass if you can take the blast counter or if you can play a card in your hand. That's not allowed in this game. The other major thing is that the way you win the game, which is obviously still reducing your opponent's base to 0, but this is a little bit different because when the first person is reduced to 0, then the table kind of gets an action to go around, and the person with the highest base HP will win the game. But the caveat here is the person who did the lethal damage to the person that was eliminated heals 5 damage from their base, and then the other 2 players would get an action to go, and then the game would end once those are all complete. So it's a little interesting, really cool, similar to like EDH style. I'm sure there'll be a lot of politics involved in this game, which will be really fun. But yeah, that's kind of the basics of the game mode.
What about the deck building? How
Oh,
that changes quite a bit from
Carbon, I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes. So as I mentioned, EDH from Magic the Gathering players, but what that basically means is that the whole deck is all singletons, and in the first 3 sets of Star Wars Unlimited, so for the first year, it's going to be a minimum of 50 cards. Once the 4th set, I believe it is, the 4th set is released, the minimum will increase to 80 cards. So you'll have an 80 card singleton deck with 2 leaders in your base, and that will be your Twin Suns deck, all single.
And just to clarify, I don't think it's actually minimum. I think it's actually only in EDH. You can only have a 99 card deck.
So the 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 article does say minimum, doesn't actually
Oh.
say. So maybe it's just minimum. I know they mentioned something about it being like the hard cap on the stream. I have to go back and rewatch that because this was like the first thing they showed on the streams, which was like hours ago at this point. So I'd have to go back and rewatch that. So I thought maybe you're right on that. I'm not positive, but the article here says minimum. So
I'll also just note that when someone is eliminated, you finish out the entire phase.
oh, it's
So
not just one
correct.
action each.
People are still
Oh,
going actions back and forth and turn until everyone has to pass or everyone's dead.
Except the person, once they're eliminated, then they no longer take actions.
They're done.
gotcha. Yeah, they're done. Okay, well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm personally hyped for this. I think this is a great game mode because
Yeah.
EDH is probably one of the most popular formats from any card game ever. People love it. It's very casual. It allows you to play cards even after they're rotated from the premier format. Because we know this game will have a rotation. We don't know much about it, but it will have one. So like it'll allow you to play cards and help cards keep values for this format even after they rotate out of the premier format.
And it's cool because sometimes you only open up one version of a super cool card. Well, now that's all you need. You just need the one card. You don't have to worry about, I don't have 3 foil hyperspace versions. But in this, you only need the one. So it's kind of eliminates a little bit of that feels bad moment there.
Yeah.
This is a super awesome format. I saw it and I was not expecting them to talk about this week because I thought that this is what they were going to talk about on Wednesday's stream. And so just getting to see gameplay and learn the new rules for this and just the new deck building and learning like to have 2 leaders on your side of the field and just the different synergies that happen when you go from 1 leader to 2 leaders is crazy to think about. And yeah, I'm so excited to try this new mode and play it. Yeah, it's very, very cool. That's what I'll leave it on.
I think like EDH in Magic, when you're evaluating a card, because of this way that this format works, you're now looking at every card differently. I think first for me, I'm always going to look at a card and think, is this a constructed viable card? And then my second thought is, how is this going to play in Twin Suns? Because they are going to be a little bit different. And I think that's just a really interesting thing. I know for me, my brain has been, once we heard the news, my brain's been thinking like, wow, what about this combo, that combo? On the stream, I think Xander picked a really good combination of Grand Inquisitor and Krennic to kind of show off the interesting connection they have. And I forget who it was, but they also had Han Solo and Sabine, and then having a resupply in there to maybe get Sabine out on turn 1 seems pretty gross.
Yeah, that was definitely a pretty cool combo he had going on.
Well, and when to your point about evaluating cards differently in this format, it changes a ton of cards that maybe aren't as good or a bit slower in constructed just explode in this game. And like we just talked about those board clears a little bit earlier in the podcast, right? That affect like defeat all units. Now in this mode, that's all units for all like 3 or 4 players, whoever's playing, right? Loses everything, which is pretty crazy. So those type of different cards we've seen so far is really cool to think about now that we have a mode where they can affect more than one player. What applications those cards have.
Definitely.
I think the coolest thing for me is running, like, let's say either 2 leaders from the same aspect or a leader and a base from the same aspect, and then one other leader, because that allows you to run the dual aspect. But what really interests me is that this actually opens up an opportunity to run 2 leaders with the same aspect and the base with the same aspect, which likely means at some point that we're going to see triple aspect cards.
Hmm.
right? Because like I had imagined that we're gonna see some heroes, some leaders that don't have a villainy or heroism alignment, that they're just gonna be two aspects, right? So that means deck building means that you have to only use the aspect, the non-heroism, non-villainy cards, which typically right now have been worse than the double aspect cards, right? But then you'll have like Krell, for example, who's double command, is a more powerful card than some other cards. So it's like I wonder how that's going to play out in future designs of the sets and stuff like that, of how they're going to do the aspects system, because not every card I would imagine is going to be heroism or villainy.
And then what's nice about that is they can print even if they hold off a little bit on the double aspect leaders, they can print triple aspect cards without having to worry about how it's going to affect the one-on-one aspect as much, and they'll can focus more on how it's going to affect multiplayer games. I expect those cards to have more like effects that are going to involve everyone, because that's the best way to play those cards.
And I will say that the typically in Commander, going back to Magic here, the cards like Command, Aggression, Vigilance, and Cunning are always very popular in those games because they offer a lot of versatility. So I would imagine that even especially early on, even though you won't have like they'll be extra expensive, they 6 cost, I think they're probably still worthwhile putting everyone that's in your color in your deck because it's just going to offer you a lot of flexibility. So if you have 3 different aspects in your Twin Suns deck, I would recommend you at least start by putting those 3 cards in your deck.
Yeah, it's like a lot of those cards are even at 6 are really powerful, especially out of those, my favorite one that I'm looking at immediately was Aggression. Just simply because the remove 2 upgrades option on that is really strong, and but it's not always available to you in a 1 versus 1 because they're not, your opponent's not guaranteed to have 2 different upgrades. Whereas if there's 4 players, you're almost certainly there's gonna be targets for you to get extra value out of that card. So I'm totally happy to pay 6 for that card in that format so I can kinda, slow down multiple people's upgrade strategies.
Apart from the Grand Inquisitor, Krennic, and the Sabine Han that we talked about a little bit earlier, what are some other leader combos that you're looking forward to, or some other cards that you're really looking forward to using in this Twin Suns format?
Well, I think for me personally, as a big control player, I think I want to go with either Iden Palpatine or maybe even just like a Vader Palpatine for like theme, but definitely a Palpatine deck for sure. Playing Super Laser Blast somehow also seems really good
Yeah,
in
it's worth
in a singleton format. I would say that having Search Your Feelings in your deck is probably pretty good, so you can get the card you need when you need it. Is also something that I want to be doing right now.
I was gonna say I wasn't sure if we mentioned it, but the one restriction on the pairings is that they have to be either both heroism or both villainy. You're not able to use a villainy and heroism leader together, so that does create a little bit of a split of like, okay, we've got for for this set at least we've got these 9 leaders that we can group, and then we've got these 9 leaders that we can group together. So as far as my combination that I'm looking at, I'm looking at Cassian. I think Cassian is very cool. He's able to, give you card advantage in this format. Seems pretty good. And you're able to run him with 2 other aspects. So you can get more cards that satisfy his condition, and then you can get another leader to support him. I was looking at like blue, like Chewbacca, to kind of support him, or Luke Skywalker. We were talking about earlier that Luke and Cassian can deploy on the same turn, making a massive swing turn for you, which seems really powerful. And Luke can even give him a shield on his deploy side when he attacks. That seems quite strong. So I'm definitely looking forward to trying Cassian out in this Twin Suns format.
Haven't really had much time to think about it. I've been scrambling to get the cards into the mod, working on a new Twin Suns mod separately.
You're gonna just play your girlfriends. Come on now, you know it.
But I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was Sabine and Leia. Like, how do you not just like do all the aggro all the time? This would allow you to. I would probably even still run the red base, Tarkentown. I mean, maybe you don't want to run 25 HP bases and then the multiplayer, but I mean, you can still, if you bring 2 red, you can still bring Saw and Aggression, playing with all the green cards with Leia. She can double tap the Rebels to get in stuff faster. You got Rebel Assault to get even more action compression. Like, it's just it's kind of a wet dream for me personally.
Leia can actually tap to make Sabine attack, which is really cool as well.
Yes, yes, it's very like, honestly, like, that's definitely the first deck I'm trying right away. But it's weird because you have to spread the damage around, right? You have to spread 3 here, 3 there, because you can't just blitz someone down and take them out because
Yeah.
of the way the game ends.
Well,
I'm still undecided on how that is actually gonna work out until I play it.
Well, I was just thinking about that because it's really weird, right? If you're the person that eliminated the one person, right? And
You do get
you
5
gain
bonus
you gain
HP.
the HP, right? Then the person who has the second highest HP, who right, is like I attack them, but then like who else do I attack? Like it's weird, right? Because if you're the third person, right? If you're the third lowest HP here, it's like who do you attack? Because you know they're gonna attack the person first, so then do you attack them? So you try to get above both of them. Like that's a really interesting end of game scenario of like who you attack and the math and trying to figure that out. And it's definitely gonna be super fun. I think I can't wait to try it out.
The
This is
way
why it's
they
so
Go
This is
ahead,
why it's so important the way that they made the end condition. I know at first there were some people in the chat I was with that discussed like a disappointment that it wasn't eliminate everyone completely and that it was a life variation to depend at the end of the game to win. But it does make it interesting for that political mind game you have to play of okay, if I do
Yes.
this, then I have to worry about what other people are going to do.
It forces you to consider, like, what are the political implications or ramifications or whatever it is of me doing this action, like, ultimately, because you can't just go after one guy and take him out and move on to the next guy.
yeah, and I will say, I know some people had mentioned that that they wanted to just see eliminating everyone separately, right? And the last person standing is the victor. But I'm so glad that they did it this way because one of my favorite things about this game is that whether it's 1v1 or in Twin Suns, right? Everybody gets to play all the time. You don't have to sit there and do your full turn and wait. It's back and forth, actions back and forth. And so this means that if someone gets eliminated, the game's not going to continue for another half hour, right? And that person's just gonna have to sit there and watch. The game's going to be over very quickly now.
Right.
And we can just so I just love that it just keeps all the players like playing and involved for the most part.
Which
That
is
I
definitely
absolutely love about
they
that strategy.
definitely touched upon that during the stream that,
Mhm.
yeah, you're not sitting there waiting potentially 30 minutes to wait for the next game to fire off, like, it's pretty much like a 5, maybe a 10-minute.
What I look forward to in future sets is having two of the same people as my leaders in Twin Suns. When we get a second Luke unit, a second
Mm.
Luke leader, having two Lukes with each other. But I'm also interested as well for the thematic, as Jrod mentioned a little bit. I'm excited to have like Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi with each other. Those will be fun combinations, I'm sure.
When we get an Ahsoka and Rex leader, you can bet I am going to be playing that for Twin Suns. I am going to have the showcase for that. It's going to be my like. I don't really want too many showcases, but those are ones I'm going to want. I'm going to have a Twin Sun deck, and I will play that deck until it's dead. Like that deck will always be with me. I'll always have that. That's going to be like my like Twin Sun deck, like that I'm
Yeah.
just like known for. I don't care how bad it is or how good. Like I'm a very spike person, and I like to be like whatever's the best I'm going to play. Those two characters can be the worst characters in the game, and I am going to play them because I love them so much.
Nice.
That's my other favorite part about this is that just between the deck building and all the characters that we know are coming in the future, just the player expression in deck building with the different variants and everything is just it's going to be beautiful. And I I think the sentence I said today is that my hype level has tripled at least 5 or 6 different times during today's stream. So I am unbelievably excited for this mode and to build some crazy wacky decks.
I was at a 10 before the stream. I'm at a 12 now. So it's really excited. It's interesting that we talked about some upcoming leaders that are going to be coming up in future sets because
No,
at the end of this stream, we
no,
did get a quick art piece
no.
for the starter leaders from set 2. So briefly, what do we think of that?
I'm hyped.
Uh,
I'm hyped.
I'm glad they don't show. I mean, Dudeness. I don't know if you can hear his groans. He does not want to see set 2 spoilers for a little bit. Well, it's a little bit of a break, and so we didn't get spoilers. We just got the art for the 2 leaders that are going to be in the starter set for set 2, and it's the Mandalorian Din Djarin and Grand Moff Gideon, or I think it's just Moff Gideon. I think I
Uh,
don't think it's Grand Moff,
Everybody kind of
but
was expecting that.
yeah,
We
I
didn't know if
was
they were
so
going to be
excited.
starters
Yeah,
for each set. That was a little bit of a mystery. Now it's basically confirmed. Looks
yeah,
like they will be, and which I think is pretty cool, and it makes for some cool themed stuff like Gideon versus Mando. I'm excited for it,
yeah.
but I don't want to see any of these set 2 cards for at least 2 months.
Yeah.
I don't know
See,
what I'm gonna do, but
Well, it
I
I'm
I
gonna say
think
some words I can't say.
I agree that I don't want to see any spoilers until like 2 months down the line. Even though I'm a big like I want all my spoilers now kind of person. Because I want to enjoy this set now. We have it all out. I want to enjoy it. I want to
exactly,
have time with
exactly.
this. I want to go crack some packs and get all the hyperspaces that I can possibly get my hands on because those things look so awesome. I'm just so excited, and I'm glad we get the Mando and Gideon spoiler, and I'm glad we got it the way we did it without having any like reveals in the card. Like I was very happy
Yeah,
with that.
like,
I think
it's
that was perfect.
fine. It does
It's a
sort of
perfect
confirm
teaser.
it does sort of confirm a lot of what we suspected about set 2. So in that regard, it's pretty cool. We were hitting the nail on the head pretty well there about the potential starter sets and what we think that set is gonna be themed around,
Well,
but
Well, and
Dudeness,
another
I'll spoil one more thing real quick. Sorry, Carbon. I'll spoil one more thing for you, Dudeness. There's also going to be a Django Fett leader in the next set. Just big spoilers there, just in case you didn't know
okay,
that.
okay, noted.
But yeah, one of the cool thing too is I think this kind of confirms that they kind of want to cycle through the different aspects with these starter sets. Because so for this first set we have Luke who is blue hero, like vigilance hero, and Vader that's aggression villainy, so red black. And so the Mandalorian and Moff Gideon seem to slot really well into Mandalorian seems like a cunning hero, and then
Right.
Mhm.
Moff Gideon seems like a green villain or command villain.
Command
So
villain.
it
Command,
seems
yep.
like they can rotate through the starter sets. So there's because right now, like for Blue Hero, we have 3 leaders this set, right?
They
And
get an extra
only
leader.
yep,
This next, they're gonna balance that out and
yeah,
give
and
the other
they'll
colors
start
presumably
yeah, they'll start
for extra
rotating
leaders.
through. So in the future,
So
maybe we'll see like a red hero versus a blue villain, right? That could be super
exactly,
exciting.
yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, yeah, really excited to see what starter sets they come in the future. But yeah.
Yeah, I
Let's
agree.
leave all that for the future.
hmm And
Yeah,
if
I
we
don't
go,
wanna see I really don't wanna see any specific cards until, like, late April, early May. I want to enjoy set 1 as has been mentioned earlier, but
yeah,
I am okay with this reveal because it just gives us a little bit of art, no aspects, no confirmed aspects, and no
yeah,
confirmed abilities. Let's enjoy set 1 with that little bit of thought in the future of,
yeah,
there is gonna be more coming forward. And so that's interesting. As Jrod did mention
absolutely.
as well with hyperspaces, we did get some information on hyperspace, a little bit more information during the stream. We did find out already in the past that the hyperspaces are going to average about 2 in every 3 packs. This is opposed to a foil, which you're going to get 1 foil per pack. What we weren't exactly sure is if you were able to get multiple hyperspaces in a single pack. As I talked about on stream, that the factors that deter and the odds that determine where a hyperspace is separate per slot. So you can get a base hyperspace or not. You can get a leader hyperspace or not. They talked about how you can get 1 common hyperspace. The uncommon hyperspace slot, we also found out that, and we knew this from earlier, was that you could get an uncommon, rare, or legendary in that 3rd uncommon slot.
Yep.
And then we also found out that you could get a rare a foil hyperspace as well. So what are our thoughts on all these different variants that you can get? Which ones are you guys thinking are interesting? And do you care more about hyperspace, more about foils?
Definitely a hyperspace guy
Yeah,
myself. My concern with the foils, I'm still like they look great and they're awesome, but I'm so concerned about the curling long term. So I'm definitely like a hyperspace guy. The full art stuff is just it looks amazing. There's gonna be no issues with it, and that's kind of where I'm gonna be. I know some folks like their shiny stuff and they look amazing and they're awesome. And if they don't curl, then they'll be worth every penny you spend on them. But for me, it's just base for me.
yeah, hyperspace. We saw so many different
There were a
hyperspace
lot.
today
There were a
on
lot.
the stream today as everyone's opening packs and playing sealed. They were showing there was pictures on Twitter and in Discord everywhere. And Hyperspace just looks absolutely beautiful. It's just even from like the most insane Luke Skywalker legendary card all the way down to like the little TIE fighter. They all look incredible. And I'm so excited. I just want to collect as many of them as I can now. And just like, especially for my Twin Suns deck where I only need one of each, right?
Yes,
I
exactly.
I don't know if it's gonna be possible without spending a bunch of money, but a full hyperspace deck would be so cool to have. So yeah, I'm really excited to collect a bunch of these, and I hope I get some cool ones in my packs.
I mean, they're super hype for sure.
Maybe I'm a little bit of an outcast on this, but I actually really like the regular frames. I think they did a really good job of making the frames unique, cool, do what they want to do, be associated with the colors. So I think I'm going to generally be looking for regular framed cards, which should be good if I want to trade my cooler cards. However, I will say the hyperspaces do look really good. I think especially a lot of the space units look really good, and I'm looking forward to just getting more of them, and we'll see over time how I'm going to build my deck.
The
The TIE
the
fighter.
hyper foils, as one person referred to them as, were really nice. I know we saw
Yeah.
one, just a snapshot of reflexes, and
Sorry,
just it's
what's a hyperspace? What's a hyperfoil?
a hyper foil is a card that's both foil and hyperspace simultaneously at once. And so it's mega fancy. It's in fact the fanciest that you can go.
Hmm. Well,
They looked really cool. We didn't see any curling on the foils in the stream like at all, like in any way, shape, or form, as far as I could tell.
Right.
So we got that go for us, at least right now. Yet to
Yeah,
be
short
determined.
term, I'm sure it'll be fine. This is a long term concern that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, I'll say
But
on hyperfoils, my favorite card that I saw today, we got a new card, Gideon Hask, which was a
Mm,
new card revealed today. But someone was able to get a hyperfoil of him, and his artwork already looks so cool, and it just looks so good with
really
when it's
pops.
hyperspace and it's like rainbow. It just and now
Pops.
I
It pops.
really want one of those. I know I'm not gonna open one, but I really want one now.
So, like, all of this is good news because this is exactly what we want in these cards. We
Yes.
want these alternate art or these special treatment cards to be desirable so that people are like, yeah, I want that card, so that the basic versions are very cheap to obtain because you don't, you everyone wants the more expensive versions, so leaving the barrier to entry to build a deck that just plays the game as cheap as possible, and that is the best possible news that most people can hear about this because those they looked great. People are going to want them, and that should hopefully mean that the basic versions are very budget comparatively.
sounds
guys,
great.
guys, I can't believe that we're less than 3 weeks until we can hold these cards in our hands. I'm really looking forward to it. Well, looks like we're out of time now. Thank you everyone for listening and joining us on this journey to release of Star Wars Unlimited on Friday, March 8th. We look forward to seeing you next time on Outmaneuver.